everybody, Gina DeLuca here. All right, so today I am going to try to somewhat recreate a painting for someone. They liked one of the paintings that I had done previously, but it was already sold. So I'm going to do something similar and see if they like it. Some news first. I am going to be moving next month, middle of November, towards the end of November. So there might be a hiatus while I pack up and move and get set up again. That might take me a bit. And in the meantime, I am going to be having an auction on October 25th. And I will have a bunch of pieces in the auction. And hopefully y'all will show up and help me find some of these pieces new homes so I don't have to take them with me to my new home. One less box would be a lovely thing. So again, October 25th at 7 p.m. right here on YouTube. I hope that you can make it. All right, now down to business. The colors that I am using. I have for my base coat / background, Amsterdam Acrylic Standard Series and Permanent Blue Violet. I find this to be a nice substitute for the Liquitex Basics Dioxazine Purple. It's not quite as dark as the Dioxazine, but as far as how it reacts with cell makers, it's a good one. You get that nice dark purple, but it's not quite black, but it's super dark. Oh, here's one. So this is in the process of being varnished, but these are all the pearl paints. It's a straight pour with the pearl paints, and it looks really cool in person. It's really difficult to show. This only has one very thin coat of varnish on it, so it's not really hard to see, but you can see what color that turns out to be when it's dry. It's just a very dark purple. And it was an interesting effect with the pearl paints on this. It'll be much easier to see it once it's fully varnished and you get that great light refraction going on. But right now, I mean, there's some really cool spots you can kind of see. And just for fun, this is another piece that will be in there. Also, only one coat of varnish, but oh, it's so pretty already. It's already got the amazing bling going on. Just a little quick preview of a couple of pieces. Here's another one that's going in there. This is also this paint, this Permanent Blue Violet. So some good examples there of how they react with the cell makers. Okay, so Amsterdam Permanent Blue Violet. This here is this little piggy in my color, Crescendo. They named it for me because I am a musician as well, and I absolutely love this color. The way that I've mixed that, I put a bit of Jo Sonja gloss varnish in the bottom of my cup while wearing a mask. Super important. Do not skip that step. Wear the mask. When you mix pigments, they become airborne. When you have studio lights, you can see it floating in the air. If you breathe that in, it gets into your lungs. It's not coming out. It's just going to stick in there. And you can imagine over time, that's very not good for you. So just wear a mask. So I start with the gloss varnish. I add the pigment to it, just enough to get it kind of wet. And I add golden regular matte gel matte. Because mattes and glosses do not mix very well, and that helps to create cells. Sometimes I can get some cells with the pigments. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. A lot of times it'll attach to the other cell makers. Right, so I add the gloss to that until it's tube paint consistency. and then I add Floetrol to it like I do the other paints. 1 part paint to 2 parts Floetrol. You can do 3 parts. If it's a highly pigmented paint, you can do even 4. This is probably 3 to 4 parts. This is very highly pigmented. It's very good paint. I have here DecoArt Americana Decor Metallics in soft gold and copper. This is just the soft gold. This is the soft gold and copper mixed. I didn't want it to be as bright as the copper is on its own. I wanted it to have a little bit of a softer look. And this here is the DecoArt Americana Decor Metallics in Amethyst. So these paints have been sitting for a bit. Sometimes that can affect the amount of cells you get. When it's a fresh jar, it can just take over the whole canvas. When it's a little older, sometimes it's not as strong of a cell maker. We'll find out. The colors are going to be really pretty together regardless of what happens. So as long as my composition looks good, I'll still be happy. So these paints are mixed 1 part paint, 2 parts Floetrol. Sometimes you can do 3, but 2 is safe. I add water to that until I get the consistency that I'm looking for. I am using distilled water. You can use a mix of Floetrol and water. I used to do a 90% water, 10% Floetrol mix. That is good for if you're just getting started. It'll help you to not over thin your paints. This is the consistency we're looking for. It does make a mound, but it disappears pretty quickly. It's making a nice thin, even stream off of my stick. It's not getting thin and thick and thin. That means that your paints have not been mixed thoroughly, your consistency is inconsistent, and you need to do some more mixing. One thing to take note of is when you are working with metallic, they're always going to look a little bit thicker than they really are because there are mica flakes in there. So that is something that you want to keep in mind to avoid over thinning. These are about a 2 on my consistency scale. You can find more information on that in the description box below, and probably a little thing that's going to pop up in the corner somewhere. Before we get started, have you seen the Fluid Art inspiration cards? If you have, you can fast forward about a minute, but if you have not, what we have are 52 cards. There are 42 technique cards, and each technique card has an associated video here on YouTube that gives you the exact information that you need: the paint brand, color, consistency, the recipe, of course, the technique, all of the things that I can't fit onto a card. This is a picture of the painting in that video. This box contains a tip for that technique, and here at the bottom you have the color palette that was used in this painting. These 2 boxes can be used together as the basis of a 2-color palette, or you can build off of those colors. And there are 8 bonus color palette cards. Each one has 5 color palettes. You can use all of the colors or just some of the colors. Mix and match the bonus color palette cards with the technique cards, and you have more combinations than you could ever paint in a lifetime. These are available at my website, ginadeluca.net, and also at amazon.com. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is check my consistency, because the sauce may thicken upon standing. I'm going to put a bit of my background / base coat into my cup, doing about 2 ounces in there. I like to make sure that I have enough for my painting and to reserve some to go on top of my cup, and possibly a little bit for the corners because sometimes they need a little extra love. You will notice I've already covered my edges, and the reason that I do that is to make sure that they are covered. I mix my paints pretty thin, and I am using Floetrol. that combination does not give the best coverage on the sides. And I don't like having to go back and touch up a painting after, especially sometimes I'm using custom blended colors for my background, and that just makes it more of a challenge. This way they are covered regardless of what happens, regardless of how the paints adhere to the sides. I don't have to go back and touch it up. I like to troubleshoot before there's trouble, as I always say. Cover the edges with the wet paint. I will likely have to come back and touch this up before I spin. The reason we lay down a base coat is because I want the paints to slide around evenly and easily. Something has to stick to the canvas first, and if it's not your base coat, it will be your poured puddle, and sometimes the coolest stuff happens on the edges, and the center of the poured puddle will just roll over the edges, so you lose that option. All right, going to take my torch, old Bernie 2 times here. Never likes the first try. Popping some of these bubbles in the base coat. One of the reasons that I use the same color for my base coat as I am using as the background in my painting is because A, it gives me the option to have negative space, but also B, to that you get little bubbles in your base coat, and when you do your pour, some of those bubbles can come up through your painting. And if I were using a white base coat and I would have these little tiny white cells popping up in my painting, that would drive me crazy. That would be something I feel like I need to go back and fix. So just eliminate that by using the same color as your background color or some color in your painting. Time to put some paint in a cup. Again, checking the consistency before I add it to my cup. Pouring from up high. I want these paints to sink and churn and blend. That is what is going to give me that very 3D effect from the Boulder cells, is the blending of the paints. This one thickened up a hair, so I'm going to add a couple of drops of water to it. This is distilled water. You want to use distilled water, particularly if you have any intention on having your paint sit around. Other waters have minerals in them, and that can kind of make your paint smell bad after a while. If I use distilled water, that paint can sit for quite some time. Okay, we are good to go. Pouring from up high. Regarding my choices and what order the paints go in, I like to have the most contrast in the center of my painting. And for whatever reason, this thickened up a hair too. For whatever reason, the last paint that I put in my cup ends up at the very, very bottom of the cup. A little bit of it ends up at the bottom of the cup, and that becomes the center of my painting. That winds up becoming the focal point. So if I'm using a dark background, then the lightest color goes in last, and if I'm using a light background, the darkest color goes in last. Okay. Just going to cover all of this up with some of my background color so that all of the cell makers have a chance to react with my glossier paint. All of those paints besides this background are either matte in nature or I have added a matte medium to it. And the Amsterdam paint dries glossy. Okay, going to do my best to stay in the center. And I'm spinning slowly. I don't want this to look like a ring pour. And the closer I get to the end of my cup, the closer I get to the canvas. That's going to give me more control. I can see that Crescendo is looking pretty prominent in here. I hope it stays that way because it is beautiful. Here comes the gold. See if any copper made it down there. Not seeing any copper. Okay. Well, the gold was the color I put in last, so that would make sense. Okay, I gave myself a little bit of a tail. Let me fix that. Doesn't seem like it would mean much of anything, but the center does typically get very stretched out. So you just want to make sure that it looks as good as it can before you start spinning. All right, got some really pretty contrast going on here. I'm going to pop the bubbles. So as mentioned before, when you pop the bubbles, it can bring the paint with it from underlying layers. And in a matter of a straight pour, that actually works to your benefit because the matte paints have a hydrophobic effect with the Amsterdam paints, with the glossy paint. So it's going to come up, it's going to bring some of the matte making or the matte paints with it, which creates cells, and they come up as little teeny tiny cells at first, but then they grow because it's pushing that glossy paint away. Again, it's the hydrophobic effect or a hydrophobic reaction. And it is really worth it to be patient at this stage, because we want the paints to have a chance to develop, the cells to develop, let that paint puddle percolate. And if I allow the cells to develop before I stretch it, I will get bigger cells. So I could stretch this right away and get a bunch of cells. They'll be pearl cells. But if I wait and allow them to develop before I tilt it, then I get more of a Boulder cell type situation, which is this very cool 3D effect. All right, well, I think I have enough stuff going on here to give me some cool boulders. I will just address my corners and my sides to make sure everything is still nice and hydrated to allow for even spillage off the sides. If your sides start to set up, it will resist the paint flowing over, and it won't flow over evenly. If you have one little dry spot, it can be a pain in the booty. So again, troubleshooting before there's trouble. Just deal with it now so you don't have to deal with it later and wind up having to fix things. The sides really do set up pretty quickly. So they usually need a bit of a zhuzhing up before I tilt or spin, because I am patient and I do allow it to sit and develop before I tilt. All right, how are we looking? These corners could use a bit more. This is not the most exciting part of the process, but I assure you, doing this little bit of extra work now will be beneficial. Okay, I think we are ready to give this a twirl. It's already going off the sides on its own. Let's do this. You don't have to spin fast. Somebody asked in one of the groups, what do you do to keep your, what do you do to keep your painting from flying off your spinner? I just don't spin fast. There is nothing holding this on my spinner besides gravity. I'm not spinning fast. That gives me more control over the painting composition, but also just the canvas itself. So it's not flying everywhere. My paint does not drip past my corners. If it is flinging, you're probably spinning a lot faster than you need to. What do we have going on in this cup? Sometimes I just like to put the cup on its side just in case I need to zhuzh it up. Let's stay. Okay. All right. If you have ever had a painting that wasn't level, you know how much it can move over time. So spinning quickly is really not necessary at all. The corner was giving a little resistance, so just zhuzh that up a little. The paint will move. No matter how slowly you spin this, the paint will still move. And the slower you spin it, the more control you will have. You can keep an eye on your painting. Make sure you're not spinning off something you don't want to. Okay, so this is why I like to do this. Just have a little bit of what is left in my cup and just kind of do the edges, the corners, and when I stretch this, it will blend out. It will look like it was just part of the original pour. And if I decide that I don't want to spin anymore, it still looks good. But typically, it will wind up coming off. So, like, one reason for doing that is I like what's going on here, and I don't want to spin too much of that off. So, I got my corners zhuzhed up. It looks good. It looks like it's part of the original pour. It doesn't look unfinished or out of place. Just this very, very corner right here. Just that little 90-degree spot. All right. Okay. This is looking good to me. I am going to let this sit, let these cells develop, see what happens. It does typically tend to grow and shift, you know, to get more cells popping up, sometimes cells within cells, but gonna let it do what it's gonna do, and I'll bring you in for a close-up. Back in a few. Okay, here it is. It's been sitting for a while. I do not anticipate any more changes. Got some really pretty soft cells going on there. I think I need to do this again. I want the copper in the center, I think. So I will revisit, but I'm not mad at this. It looks very, very floofy, very puffy, like clouds, like more like clouds than boulders because they look soft. But there it is. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed. Please do like, share, and subscribe and all that good stuff. If you are subscribed, please make sure you click that bell so that you are notified when I put up new content. Check out the description box below for links to my PayPal tip jar if you feel so inclined, my website, GinaDeLuca.net, where you can find my art and music and fluid art inspiration cards for sale. You can also find the cards at Amazon. Also, you'll find my affiliate links, DecoArt being one of them. There's a coupon code there, and if you enter through that link, I will receive a small commission at no additional cost for you. Also, Fluid Art Company, where I get my Amsterdam paints and the Joe Sonia. What else is there? Oh, our website. Go make some art. Join us there. Post your masterpieces. Ask your questions. Get some inspiration. A good time is had by most. It is the internet after all. And is that it? I think that's it. I don't know. I always forget something at the end of these things, so if I forgot something, it's probably in the description box, so just go check that out. And please do come back on October 25th at 7 p.m. I will be having an auction, and it's going to be a moving auction. I'm moving, so I need to make some space here. All right. That is it for me for today. I hope you all have a beautiful day. Now go make some art.